Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Again, I want to talk a little bit more about the Path of Exile 2 situation that's going on. This particular video isn't necessarily a rant about the game itself and how it's going. It's more about focusing in a little bit more on the philosophy that the developers seem to have for their game and why that's not necessarily the best way to go. It's another aspect of things that I haven't really focused on yet. Now, obviously, if you've been paying any kind of attention to what's going on, you know that the developers are releasing patches to address many of the issues that Zizarin pointed out during his recent 2-hour-plus live stream that he had with them. And, you know, that's a good thing. It's good that they listen to at least some of the player base and they're responding to things that people say. But in my opinion, the issue that's happening is that the vision for the game is based off of a false premise. And that is that a game can be mentally stimulating and engaging at all points during your playing of it. Now, I find that amusing because the name of the company is called Grinding Gear Games, which means that they supposedly understand the idea of what grinding actually means. Now, I want to go over the definition, at least from a gaming perspective, of the word grind, so that we can understand why I believe that the philosophy that they have over there at the game is kind of flawed. The viewpoint and the way that they're approaching the development of their game is flawed. When you think of the word grind, you think of something that is pretty mindless, pretty boring, pretty labor-intensive. It requires you to put a lot of time and effort and, you know, maybe not necessarily the maximum amount of focus, but it is going to require you to actually do something to get something done. And that's reasonable. That's something that, you know, many of us expect in certain kinds of video games, especially action RPGs like Diablo. Well, I mean, I guess not Diablo. Diablo doesn't really have too much of a grind, but you know what I mean. Path of Exile is one of those games that you just kind of grind through, and it's punctuated by instances of, wow, that was really cool. And the function of a grind is not to sink time into something for the sake of sinking time into something. It isn't to get into the world and feel like you're experiencing the world for the sake of experiencing the world. When you grind through a game, you're trying to get something done. You're trying to accomplish something. You're trying to get from where you are to where you're trying to be. And the problem that the developers have is that they're not recognizing that we want to grind through the game. We don't want artificial slowdowns to prevent us from getting from the very beginning of the game to the end of the game. And what I'm really talking about right now is the replayability of the game. This is really the part where they're so focused on creating an awesome first-time experience that they're completely ignoring the fact that almost all of us are going to have to go back through this stuff over and over and over again, and we don't want it to take a really long time to get it done. They're trying to make it so that the mundane, everyday things that you do have some kind of meaning attached to it, but that's not what a grindy game is supposed to be. What it's supposed to be is you're putting grindy time into acquiring gear and acquiring currency and acquiring the things that you need to get ready for the meaningful combat. I would not necessarily have an issue with the developer's vision if their focus was that certain bosses in the game should require A, gear checks, B, learning their boss mechanics and how to do them, and C, having a decent amount of skill to be able to get past those hurdles. And if those things are going to be, you know, act bosses or, you know, the equivalent of the Arbiter and those big high-level things, those absolutely should be things in the game that require you to have all three of those things. You need to have the right gear. You need to have the right skill set. You need to learn the boss mechanics to the point where you're able to anticipate what they're doing. Those should be milestones that you need to reach. Everything else outside of that should just be a time sink that makes you feel like you're getting meaningful progression. Okay? The problem that we're having here is that they're so focused on this idea of meaningful combat that that they completely forgot about the idea of meaningful progression. Okay? And that's what grinding is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be a slog where, you know, every monster you fight is supposed to take up X number of seconds. No, that's not what we want out of a video game. We want to feel like every minute that we're putting into the game actually means something. It's not a waste of our time. You know, it may not be massive jumps all the time. Every once in a while you get a really cool drop or something like that. But you know, when you're playing through the game, you want to smash through the easy mobs. You want to, you know, more or less smash through the blue mobs. Maybe the rares require a bit more time and attention, but for the most part, the way it was in the 0.1 version of the game, all the way through maps. I disagree with this idea that the campaign is going to be toned down, but we're still going to keep maps to where the point where, you know, you're having to slog through the maps. No, that's not what we want out of our game. We want the time that we spend grinding on the small stuff to give us meaningful progression so that when we get to the big boss fights that are supposed to give us the meaningful combat, we're ready for it. Meaningful combat cannot be meaningful all the time, because if everything is meaningful, as I said in my last video, it's not meaningful. The only way that something can be meaningful is if it's not happening every second and every time that you do something. That's what makes it meaningful. So that's really the kind of point I want to get to, is that there really needs to be a distinct, and the developers really need to get this into their minds, and because if they really internalize this idea and start focusing on the difference between meaningful progression versus meaningful combat, then the decisions that they start making for the game are going to start to make a lot more sense. They're going to start to make people a lot more happy, because the focus is going to start going into the things that matter to the players. And this vision of trying to make every second this epic experience that you're in is just, you know, it needs to fall by the wayside. You can't do that, because if everything is epic, then nothing is. You can't. There has to be contrast. So what is grinding? Grinding is putting in time and effort. You're getting something back for your time and effort, preferably consistently getting something. Because if you're going to grind on something, you need to be seeing constant results out of that grind. Otherwise, you're not going to be motivated to do it. You're getting consistent progression, meaningful progression out of the grind that you're doing that gets you ready for the meaningful combat that the developers want to put into the game. I don't necessarily have a problem with the idea of meaningful combat, but meaningful combat needs to be applied to specific scenarios, and then everything else is meaningful progression. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I think that needs to be the conversation that more people are having moving forward. There is a place for meaningful combat in every game that you play, but especially Path of Exile 2. But the vast bulk of the game that you play needs to be meaningful progression. Meaningful progression needs to come first, punctuated by meaningful combat. Okay, so that's what I wanted to talk about. Hopefully that makes sense. Click the like button, subscribe to help us reach 10,000 subscribers. Join as a member for early access to videos, among other perks, or you can just leave YouTube's version of a tip with the thanks button. Also have PayPal and Patreon links if you prefer to go that route. Again, thanks for watching. Be sure to come back for our next video and check out the other series that I have going on, Elite Dangerous and American Truck Simulator, and some other things that I have going on. And I'll see you then.